Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, August the 6th in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show, but before we do that, I'd like to thank our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this all happen. Walter, as you know, the Mount Polley mine disaster occurred just a couple of days ago. Everybody's talking about it. A huge tailing, what they call a tailing pond. It's actually not a pond, it's a lake. It's about 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers. Somebody said on the radio today it was also about 100 feet deep. I don't know if that's correct, but a huge amount of water and a huge amount of, basically, with every mine, all the waste rock that's left over, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of waste rock from all of these mines, and it's toxic. Once you take the rock out of the earth and pile it up on the ground, it begins to leach heavy metals and poisons into everything. Every mine, I think, or most mines, or many mines, and you know, it's amazing how little we know about this, and yet it's a huge problem. They all have tailing ponds, or many of them have tailing ponds, and in the end they're all going to fail, because this stuff remains toxic basically forever. Once we take the minerals out of the earth and take out the copper or the gold or whatever it is we want, and we pile up these thousands and thousands of tons of waste rock, what we call waste rock, that stuff is toxic. It's got to be, many of mines, it has to be kept covered with water forever. And it's not going to happen. They're all going to fail. And to me, the lesson is this: we've got to just use less. And we've got to know the problems we face. This issue of these tailings pond, it's called acid mine drainage. Nobody knows about it. It's never mentioned in the media, although I will say CKNW has done a great job of coverage. CKNW is a radio station out of Vancouver. They've done a very good job out of this, on this particular issue. They've given it a lot of coverage, but it is the whole thing, mining, not this failed pond or lake, but mining is an environmental disaster. And if we want to keep wasting and using and consuming the way we are, we're going to poison everything, and we can't do it.
Well, it reminds me a little bit like in the 70s when there was acid rain, and it was when they built all the smokestacks, and what they had to do, they had to put scrubbers in, and they eliminated that environmental threat. And the same thing I think here, we're mining the costs of actually using more of the metals that they take out. For instance, like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tons of copper and silver and other things in those tailings ponds. That seems to me that they should be able to take out of that and to use as a resource. And this should all be a part of the cost of production. Why are we left holding the bag? A lot of these guys are long gone, and these tailing ponds are going to be sitting there, and we have to deal with it. And by the way, the technology they use for the dams and the earthen dams, it's all very, very, it's inappropriate. It just simply will not last through any serious catastrophe or any environmental event like an earthquake or whatever. So I mean, they're just making profits. They're getting out of there as fast as they can, but we're left holding the bag. Why is that? Well, we don't have a government that's going to bat for us, and we don't have regulators. We don't have regulations. We don't have inspectors. We don't have an environmental protection. It's all been whittled down and hardly exists in this province any longer. And in the end, you get these sort of events. And look forward to some more if we don't have, if we don't create these protections in our laws and our regulations, we're going to have a lot more of these problems.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'll go back to what I said. We've got to just all use less. We've got to get used to using less. You mentioned earlier when we were having coffee that the weight of, for example, the arsenic that was in that pond, the number of weight in terms of cars.
Yeah, let me just read a couple of numbers to you. Sometimes it's confusing, and they're always in the media, they're reporting, in metric tons or kilograms or gallons. And I was trying to figure out, well, firstly, how much was spilled. And basically, the volume of the sludge, the toxic sludge, mixed with water, and mostly water and toxic sand, is the same volume about as Elk Lake. So when next time you drive past Elk Lake, take a look. That's how much was leached out of that dam, and now is into the river systems that will eventually make its way to the ocean. So at certain concentrations, it will kill fish. It will always lie in the bottom of those streams forever. You know, the issue here is they talk about cleanups. You know, some things, you know, you can't clean up.
You can't clean up.
You know, we don't have the technology to clean up, nor do we have the abilities. The company, for instance, is not going to clean this up fully. And I think we may end up with a leather gigantic situation where the railroad company that caused the catastrophe went bankrupt, and now they're picking up the tab, which is around $500 million so far, taxpayers' money. This is all headed in that direction. Don't be surprised in 2 or 3 weeks, this company, which is Imperial Minerals, probably will go into receivership, and then we're going to pick up the tab. And it really isn't fair. It absolutely isn't fair to us that we allowed that scenario to play out. When you start right at the start of the proposals for mining, they have to build. If they're going to go into containment like that, these should be concrete dams, just like anything else.
But you know, even if it's concrete,
Yeah,
the stuff remains poisonous for centuries.
yeah,
In the end, they're all going to fail. All of these dams are going to fail.
yeah.
And the slurry and the poison is going to move out into our ecosystems. You know, can we continue using minerals the way we use them? I mean,
Well, that's a big question. I mean, you know, we got to go from here to there. There's something in the middle. We can't just get up in the morning and say we're not going to use any more gold or whatever. But we're in this area right now where we just want all the benefits, and we don't have to pay any of the costs. The companies are there to make profits, and they're going to minimize their expenses. They externalize all the environmental impacts. That's a big term, you know, externalize it, so it doesn't fit into their profit picture, and the government allows it to happen. But it just doesn't make any sense. If you or I, and by the way, I'm a small business owner, and I could tell you lots of stories about regulators and inspectors and auditors, and they got lots of money to spend on chasing little guys like me around and try to get another few bucks out of us. Meanwhile, these big players are just totally ignored. They just basically do whatever they want. Everybody thinks it's wonderful. And, you know, and often you'll see the opposition parties running around with hard hats on and all bright eyes in some of these facilities, thinking it's so wonderful. And they're not bringing on any big proposals either, including the Green Party of BC. Very, very lax in this file. I don't know if they've actually even made a statement about this yet, but we just don't have it. Basically, we have an environmental party that's not really an environmental party, as far as I'm concerned. We have a social democratic party that I know a little bit about, as I have always declared myself a social democrat, and they're not social democrats. And you have a liberal party that's not a liberal party. So it's all kind of branding. Nothing's real anymore. And you just wonder, well, who's running the show here, Jack? Who's steering the ship? It's obviously not Christy Clark. It's obviously not any of these other ministers. They arrive like Bill Bennett arrives and takes over this portfolio. What's his background? You know, there's no expertise there to really manage it, to actually critically, you know, go over all these different issues about development permits and stuff like that, and stepping back and saying, no, hang on here, this is not good enough. Ministers don't do that. If they did that, they would just say, okay, you're shifted out. We'll bring somebody else in stupid enough to let it happen. And that's on and on we see this happening. So we just don't have any recourse as anybody in the general public. Really, we're wondering, well, how can we access this? How can we help? You know, what kind of pressure can we bring to bear? And it just doesn't seem that there's any place you can go.
You know, people on the radio were calling it the single biggest catastrophe in environmental catastrophe in BC history. Some people were saying that. Maybe this is a chance for us as a people of this province to step back and let's talk about the whole issue of how we want to run this province. And if we want to make changes, maybe this is the time when we should start.
Yeah.
Let's move on. You wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with public education.
Well, you know, the teacher strike is still on, and it seems to be the sides are tending to be further and further apart all the time. No matter what you see, what's happening in the media, the government has gone off on a crazy tangent with this idea of giving all parents with kids under 13 $40 a day while for daycare or something while they're out of school, which really, if you look at that, it's like a union busting tactic, because you know, of course, when you withhold services, the idea is that there's going to be a little bit of suffering there to bring the government along to negotiate fairly, and they're looking like they're trying to buy off parents. It really diminishes the whole process. It's just really, I think, cheapens the whole thing. And I don't think the sincerity in the government when they're coming forward with these sort of ideas. And as you know, we talked about this earlier, is that, you know, you did try to interview the Minister of Education.
Yeah, and we'll show that little clip. It's just 3 minutes long. We tried to get an interview with Peter Fassbender, the Minister of Education, and you can see what happened. Today is July 17th. We're at the legislative buildings in Victoria, British Columbia. Public education is under attack in BC. The corporate media calls it a teacher strike. We call it a corporate attack on public education being carried out by a corrupt and undemocratic government. We tried to arrange an interview with Education Minister Peter Fassbender, but his office said he wasn't available. But even though Mr. Fassbender won't answer the questions, we still think they're important to ask. Mr. Fassbender, BC Supreme Court Justice Susan Griffin recently accused your government of having tried to provoke a teacher strike in 2011 in order to turn public opinion against the teachers. It's now 2014 and the teachers are on strike. Did you provoke this strike? And if so, will you resign? Mr. Fassbender, you're quoted as saying, "Our government has a fundamental commitment to balance the budget." You suggest that this is why there's no more money for public education, but your government has, since 2001, put in place tax cuts that are now costing the province about $7 billion a year. And of that $7 billion a year, you are giving the biggest cuts to the richest people and the biggest corporations in the province. Mr. Fassbender, is your government starving our schools to give tax cuts to the banks and the oil companies? One last question, Mr. Fassbender. The corporate media always calls this a teacher strike, as if the teachers were to blame, but you and Christy Clark are not to blame. Mr. Fassbender, is this a teacher strike, or is this an attack on public education being carried out by your government? Well, we don't have any answers, but these are important questions. Number one, why did the government try to provoke a teacher strike in 2011? Number two, why is Christy Clark cutting public education to pay for tax cuts to BC's richest people and biggest businesses? And number three, why won't BC's corporate-owned media ask these questions? I'm Jack Etkin for ICTV.
Now, I mean, I've been looking at some of the aspects of this. I mean, you try to figure out what the heck what these positions are. Again, it's the government negotiators, you know, twice the government's been shown not to be in good faith in the Supreme Court of British Columbia. They're now holding out, trying to bring this to the Supreme Court of Canada. It troubles me greatly, given that 7 of the 9 Supreme Court justices have been appointed by the Harper regime. Sometime or other, I think that's going to come back and really bite us. on very hard and big issues like this. But I think it's a delaying tactic and all that. And it's very, very serious that the government is dragging this out and really, really starving the teachers. The teachers haven't had a check since the end of May. And we're talking about if they even resolve this, will be into October. And there's some hardship going on. And the level of bitterness right now in this province with the teachers and all the teacher supporters. And by the way, there's a lot of people are supporting the teachers. We've kind of entered into another era of real intense emotion and just incredible unfairness by the government in this case. And I don't think that's going to heal very quickly at all. It's not just like your standard sort of political issue that there's winners and losers. No, this is dividing our society, and the government of any province or any nation, the number one role is to unify and to bring together society, not to rip it apart. And with this minister and with this premier, it's a pathological obsession for them to defeat the teachers at any cost. And I think it's very detrimental to society in general. It's a very serious issue.
Yeah, personally, as I said in that little clip, I think it's an attack on public education. I don't know if you feel the same way, but that's...
there's no doubt about it. I mean, I've been around in this province for 30 years or more, and I've seen the solidarity movement, this is getting there. There is some discussion about a general strike now. They have no options, by the way. It just seems with the corporate media, we're talking about a corporate government, Jack. There's nothing in the middle. We're not trying to pretend that, they're looking out after the corporations. This is the corporation in action. This is what they do. They totally dismiss any values that are outside of what they think are important. Students and teachers are just fodder in the battle, and they don't care what the outcome is as long as they can stomp on the teachers and bust that union. To me, that's the agenda.
I want to move on to one of my favorite topics, which is the Blue Bridge. There was a story in the Victorian News. This is on July 25th, so just a couple of weeks ago. It's called Broken Bridges. I just want to read what it says. There's a picture of Mayor Dean Fortin there. The headline is Broken Bridges, and the subhead says, a scathing consultant's report on the $93 million Johnson Street Bridge has Mayor Dean Fortin determined to fix the problem. And when I read that, I thought, why in the world are they presenting Mayor Fortin as the one who's going to fix the problem when he, more than anybody else, has been the one who caused this problem? We've got to remember that the original consultant's report was for a $10 million repair. We're now up to close to $100 million. And it was Dean Fortin who led us there into the mess we're now in. Dean Fortin, Pam Madoff, Chris Coleman, Charlene Thornton Joe, those.
Yeah.
And even worse than the $100 million we're spending for no reason whatsoever, because the original report called for a $10 million repair, is the fact that the rail bridge was taken out, which means we can't have rail coming from Langford into downtown Victoria. So that now has been set aside, and the new plan is for a $900 million light rail system going from Langford to the Walmart Mall, the Uptown Mall, Walmart, and then into downtown. That will de facto make Walmart the center of the city. And I think that's what this is all about. Nothing else seems to make sense. And yet here is the Victoria News, and CFAX has been the same, and the Times Colonist has been the same. They keep pretending or telling us that Dean Fortin is trying to find the solution. Well, maybe he is, but they should also be telling us that Dean Fortin caused the problem, and they're not telling us that.
I'm just speculating, Jack, but I think it might have something to do with there's elections coming up in November, and a lot of these people want to get reelected. Might want us to forget a little bit of the history of how these decisions were made. I believe, and I know you've always thought, that this was basically a ripoff to the public, a totally unnecessary expense, very similar to the sewage treatment plants.
Yeah, very undemocratic.
Yeah, and you're really seeing, I think, a lot of spin starting to happen coming up in these elections to try to paint perhaps some of these politicians in a better light. My view is anybody that was in favor of the Blue Bridge should be tossed out. It's just ridiculous. There was no evidence to support doing it, as it was with the sewage treatment plant. Really and truly, there was no hard science to support the whole program. They wasted what was 65 million now spent on this on trying to get it going
on the sewage treatment.
Yeah. So we're talking about wasting millions and millions of dollars when there's absolutely nothing to support what they want to do.
We're almost out of time. We've got 1 minute left. 1 minute left.
Well, we always have to talk about smart meters a little bit, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
In Saskatchewan has rejected smart meters. They had a bunch of fires after they plugged them in, so the Saskatchewan Powers decided to revert back to the analog meters. So that's a good news story. That's been happening in other jurisdictions in the States, especially in smaller jurisdictions where there's smaller power companies and stuff like that. They're really seeing that the so-called smart meters are not smart at all.
BC Hydro says there's no problem here.
Apparently not, although we're having a hard time finding what the truth is and how many fires actually have been started. Fire reports are not consistent. Fire chiefs don't have to report incidences in certain categories. I think what we're going to do is we're going to find one day a house is going to burn down and a few people are going to die, and then we're going to find out what the truth is. And we don't know when that's going to happen.
Walter, thank you very much.
Very welcome, Jack.
I can't believe that was 20 minutes. And thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. This is being filmed on Wednesday, August the 6th in the Memorial Arena in Victoria. Our guest in this segment is Rick Habgood. Rick, you've been on quite a few times before, and when you come on, we always talk about proportional representation, a different way of voting that both you and I think would make a lot of positive changes if we could just get it here in Canada. So you were recently in Europe, and let's find out what you found out.
Okay, well, about a month and a half ago, I was in Europe, in Austria, and in Vienna. And Vienna is a very beautiful, incredibly beautiful city. And what I did was I searched out the Austrian Greens, because I wanted to see how they were doing, because they are within a proportional representation system. Our Greens are not. And I'd like to see how they were doing in comparison to how our Greens are doing.
Okay.
Well, their Greens are doing very, very well. They have many members in Parliament, whereas we have one. And so I met a few of the members of Parliament there, and one of the fellows, George, I got into a conversation with him about their electoral system. That's my issue, is proportional representation.
Now, just before you go on, we should mention that there are many different kinds of proportional representation voting systems.
Right.
But what they all try to do is give a party seats based on the number of votes that the party gets.
That's right.
So, for example, if a party gets 10% of the vote, it should get about 10% of the seats.
Exactly.
Here, with our first past the post system, it's completely different. For example, in the last federal election, as you told me a couple of months ago, the Conservatives got about 6 million votes and elected 166 members of Parliament. The Greens got 600,000 votes, 1/10 as many. They elected one person.
Right.
So 6 million votes elected 166 Harper Conservatives. 1/10 as many votes, 600,000, elected one Green member of Parliament. With a PR system, proportional representation, the Greens would get 10% of the seats that the Conservatives got, which just seems fairer.
Well, it is fair. And when you really look at the two different systems, I met a German social scientist a couple of years ago when I was in Berlin. And I had a fascinating conversation with him. And he said that we talked about the electoral system. And he said that in proportional representation, it is collective, it's collective power, it's people power. In a first past the post system, it's very much an individual power. In our system, our first past the post, we are taught right from the get-go that we are on our own. We have to do it on our own. It's our responsibility to get rich, basically. That's what it's all about. And if you fall and you do not make it, then it's your responsibility. And don't expect the government to pick you up and help you. That's first past the post. In a PR system, the wealth is a collective wealth. So consequently, you can still go out and get a great job and become wealthy, because there's many wealthy Germans and many wealthy Austrians. But the system is set up so that the wealth is collected through taxes and then redistributed through different ways. And it's one of the ways in which it's distributed is with the homeless. And the social scientist that I had a conversation with last year in Germany, in Berlin, he said, if you want to get a quick snapshot of a country, you look at the homeless situation. And from that homeless situation, you will find out what that country and how that country is doing in a social manner. And how that country is doing socially will also be how that country is doing as far as the health of the country goes. So he said, that's what you want to look at. So he said, in a proportional representation system, if it's being run properly and it's not corrupted, he said, you'll find that the homeless situation is dealt with in a way that's totally different from how they deal with it in a first past the post. And what you want to do is you want to look at England, you want to look at Canada, and you want to look at the United States. And then you want to look at the homeless situation in those three countries and how they're doing. And then you want to take a PR country that is functioning properly, such as Denmark, or Germany, or Austria, or Switzerland, or Sweden, or Norway, any of the Nordic countries, any of those Northern European countries. Their systems are working very well. So that's what this show's about. So I thought I would take the homeless situation and talk about the homeless situation in regards to first past the post and proportional representation. Let's just see what the health card says.
Okay.
Okay. So in Vienna, we'll talk about Vienna first. In Vienna, I wanted to meet a homeless person. And I was on my way to the Green Party store. They have two offices. They got the political office, and they have the store. And you can go into the store, and there's everything in it is green. You can buy anything you want, and it's green. And on the way there was a fellow on a street corner, and he was selling a magazine called Augustine. And it was a homeless magazine, right? So I came up to...
And this was a homeless person.
He was a homeless person, yeah, selling a homeless magazine, right? Just like people do with street news.
Yep.
So I came up to him, and I had a conversation with him, and I introduced myself, and he introduced himself, Francis. And so, anyways, I said to Francis, I said, so you're homeless? And Francis said, yes, I'm homeless. And I said, okay. I said, are you Austrian? And he said, yes, I'm Austrian. So we got into a conversation about homelessness in Vienna, and the short of it is that I asked him a few questions, and I knew a little bit beforehand. I knew beforehand a number of things that Vienna does for the homeless. They have what they call the Vienna Social Fund. Okay.
The Vienna
The
Social
Vienna Social Fund.
Fund. Okay.
Fund. Okay, and the fund is supported and paid for by the city of Vienna and the Austrian government. And the Vienna Social Fund, what that does, if you wind up on the street and you're Austrian, very important, and you're Austrian, okay, you're given a home. It doesn't matter. Vienna is the largest city in Austria. It's got almost 2 million inhabitants. So that means that if you are homeless in all, like, you know, the smaller areas around Vienna, you go into the big city because that's where the services are for the homeless. So if you wind up in Vienna and you come out, you go to the Vienna Social Fund and you say, I'm homeless, they will automatically give you social housing. And if you're disabled, in other words, you really can't work, then they will give you social housing and all the benefits for the rest of your life. You never have to worry about it.
And I just want to point
Sure.
out that we can do that too. There's no reason we can't do exactly the same thing in Canada, except that all the money is going to the 1% here.
That's first past the post.
It's first past the post.
That's what I'm saying. You like first past the post. It's got everything to do with individual wealth.
So our voting system is very important in the kind of society we have become.
We live in.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I never realized it. As you know, we've discussed this because I didn't realize that the electoral system had such an impact on the society at large.
Yeah.
You know, I know every vote counts in a proportional representation, and that's as far as I ever took it. I never actually went beyond that until I met that fellow in Berlin, the social scientist. And he pointed out that it goes way beyond that. He said that the electoral system actually creates the society, which in turn creates the culture. He said there isn't any facet of a society that you can't lead back to the electoral system. That's that's a big statement.
And a very important point that never gets discussed here in Canada, but should be.
Well, not only that, I don't know all that many people who even have thought about it, to be quite honest with you. And so I think that now that we're onto it, I'm hoping that there's going to be more discussions about it. Homelessness. So anyways, so I kept on talking to Francis, and I asked Francis, I said, okay, now, one of the things I noticed about you, Francis, is that you got beautiful teeth. You had better teeth than me, you know, beautiful looking teeth. And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, do you get dental care? He said, yeah. He said, that's part of the health care. He said, I get health care because I am a citizen of Austria, he said. I get all the benefits of being a citizen. And one of the things is that you get health care. And health care, it includes dental care. So he gets to go to the dentist 3 times a year, and his teeth are great. So
Whereas here, poor people can't go to a dentist and they have to
not only
suffer.
poor people, self-employed people
Yeah,
that aren't so
it's
poor.
a disgrace.
You know, I mean, you get somebody that's self-employed, and like myself, for example, and all of a sudden all of a sudden the dentist tells me I need like something that's going to cost me $3,000 or $4,000.
You have to go to work
Where
for
am I
Home
going to
Depot.
get that? I'm going to have to borrow it and then pay for it, right? So, anyways, if you're lucky enough to be insured, then you're okay. So, anyways, we better move on here, Jack. Time's moving on. So, anyways, the short and long of it is that in Vienna, there are no homeless Austrians. They all have homes.
And I wish, yeah.
This guy lived in a tent though, and he wanted to live in a tent. Because I challenged him on it. I said, well, if you wanted to, you could have social housing. He said, yes, but I choose not to. I don't want to live like that because they force you to go to school. And I said, okay. So in other words, if you accept the social housing and all that goes with it, you also have to go and get educated and get back and become a member of society. And he said, that's right. And I chose not to do that. So I live in a tent.
In the summer.
In the summer, yeah.
Right. In the winter, he moves inside, he said.
He goes
Yeah.
inside in the winter, yeah. But and not only that, he was talking about, he had, like, he in his mind, he was creating a small footprint.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And just think of all the social problems we have in this city of Victoria because of the homeless problem.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be nice not to have all of those problems that we all have to deal with because we have such a big homeless population? There's no need for it. It's deliberate.
Well, there's no need for it, but we have to change our system. It's not going to happen. The Christy Clark and Bill Bennett isn't all of a sudden not just going to become socially responsible people. It ain't going to happen, Jack. So it doesn't matter how much you squawk.
Yeah.
So anyways, Greater Victoria has a population of 365,000 people. And we have over 1,000 homeless. I checked. Okay. 2013, over 1,000 homeless. Metro Vancouver, has a population of 2.3 million, a little over 2.3 million. And they have 2,777 homeless, all right? Now, these are people without homes. These are people that do not have a place to go to. They have to go to shelters, all right? Toronto has a population of 2.8 million, all right? 5,219 homeless. Now, one thing we gotta factor into this is that out of all those homeless people, 10% of them are seniors. So that means that there's somebody that's 65 or 70 that's living on a pension and they can't even afford a place to live. 10%. It's a lot of people. Greater Vienna, there are no homeless unless you want to be. So there's a difference between first past the post society here in Canada and a proportional representation society. First past the post, it's all about individual wealth. If you're wealthy and I'm not, too bad for me. You're okay, and you can drive away in your Mercedes and you don't have to care because you're okay. You're leaving behind the problem. And that's how we do it in our society. Okay? In a proportional representation system, it's collective wealth, which means that the money gets redistributed. Higher taxes, but it gets redistributed in ways that creates a more richer and healthier society.
And you know what? That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see a richer,
so would I.
healthier society. Yeah.
We're fighting for it. We got to fight for it. And each time I come onto the show, I'm going to pick a different topic. But I thought the homeless would be a good place to start.
Rick, we're out of time, believe it or not.
Isn't that incredible?
Thank you, Rick, and thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.
Welcome back to Choices. For those of you that are coming back, welcome, and I hope you've enjoyed the show in the past. For those of you that are new, Choices is basically a show that allows us to hear from various practitioners around the island on the various therapies that they offer us in our healthcare system. Quite often we're looking for alternatives outside of mainstream, and the show tries to highlight those people that are offering quality therapy that can be helpful in our healthcare. So today we are going to be discussing what Trager therapy is, and I have the pleasure of introducing to you today Audrey Murray, who is a senior certified Trager practitioner, a facilitator in workshops, and also an author of 2 books, one Trager for self-healing and also the pathway to presence. So Audrey, thank you for coming on the show. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much for having me,
You're
Cameron.
welcome. Now, I don't suppose many of our viewers know exactly what Trager is, Trager therapy. So why don't we start there,
Okay.
and we'll go from there.
Well, Trager integrates the body, mind, and spirit using safe touch, gentle movement in a meditative state of presence.
Okay.
And we categorize it as a movement re-education, because what we're actually doing through touch and movement is informing the unconscious mind of what it feels like to be soft and free and open and spacious and light.
Okay.
And by doing that, the unconscious mind then will say, oh yeah, I remember what that feels like, and it can choose to let go of its holding patterns on a very causal level.
Okay, so let's leave that for now,
Sure.
for a moment, but I'd like to discuss with you what got you into this, what brought you into this type of field, because I understand you're fairly highly trained in this.
I am. I've been doing this work for almost 30 years
Okay,
now,
all right.
and it's amazing to me that I have.
Okay.
But what started it was actually my husband at the time and I went to see a demonstration of a doctor doing this type of body work, and as I was watching her do this work, my mouth started to drool, and I not only wanted to be the one on the table, I wanted to be the one that was doing the actual work,
Okay.
because it looked like a dance to me, and it looked so delicious that I just felt that, oh, I have to do this. And so I changed my career. I used to be a medical laboratory technologist, and I was doing immunology research at the time. And then I had children and decided that I wanted to do something that I could be a little more flexible in my work. So I inquired about the Trager approach, and then I went to different classes, and you had to travel in those days to find a class for this work, and so I did.
Wonderful.
And here
And
I
then the
am.
years go by, and now here you are in
Here I
Victoria.
am. Yes, I am.
Now, let's compare, if you could, Trager approach to, when you talk about mind, body, spirit connection, a lot of modalities, a lot of different practitioners use that as a descriptor in how they're actually working. How does the Trager differ from, let's choose something that most people know about, say massage therapy?
Okay, well, what happens with the most important part of Trager is the meditative aspect. And in order to elicit the kind of feeling experiences I want the person to have, I have to be in a certain meditative state. And that state starts with you being in the present moment.
Okay.
And in the present moment, you access the life force. And that life force is what I am introducing back into somebody else's body and mind. And when they know about this and feel this in their body, they remember what that feels like, and so they'll let go. So it's not, a lot of people think that Trager is just rocking a body, and once you're rocking a body, hey, I'm doing Trager, but that's not the way it is at all.
Okay.
Because that movement is just the conduit to which I can send this information.
Okay. Now, when you say this information, are you intentionally thinking of something as, or is this more of an opening yourself up to a higher consciousness?
It's opening myself up to a higher consciousness, and I have to be in that state in order to give. You can't give what you don't have.
Right.
And so any Trager session would be very dependent on the practitioner giving it. So that practitioner, the more that they can access that life-giving, life-regulating force that is all around us and in us, and we are it, that is what I give to my client. And to the extent that they are willing to open up to receive it is how much they will gain from the session.
Okay. So just to clarify then, you're a conduit. It's not like you're giving your life force.
No.
You're conduiting
I'm
it
a
through.
conduit to just express what the life force is to somebody else. So it's a being thing.
So and they're remembered, they're
Yeah.
reminded, I should say, really what then that life force feels like, and
Exactly.
it re-kickstarts their
Exactly.
life force?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the thing is that it's a feeling experience, and once you have a feeling, you own it.
Yeah.
I could sit here and talk about presence
Right.
until the cows come home, but until I'm actually there and feel it. I don't own it.
Right,
And so
okay.
what I'm doing is giving somebody a feeling experience, because it's that feeling that talks to the unconscious mind.
Okay.
And when the unconscious mind gets that feeling, it says, oh yeah, I remember what that feels like, and it'll let go.
Okay. So then who typically seeks out your services?
Oh, Trager can benefit people with mobility issues, people who have balance issues, people who have accident, people with neuromuscular disorders like Parkinson's or MS, people who've had stroke, people with chronic pain problems,
So pretty much
migraines,
anything that they want to help heal. Now, typically though, who in Victoria, how do people find you and how do they come to you? Why do they come to you?
Well, for years I did lots of demonstration and just networking, putting myself out there so people know. You can find me through my website.
Okay, we'll have that up on the show,
Yeah,
folks,
and
for
we'll
you
have
at the end of
that.
the show.
Yeah, and I'm also in the healthcare directory, the Victoria Healthcare Directory, and word of mouth is the biggest thing.
And
I
hopefully
think.
this show.
Yeah,
hopefully-
and this show,
yeah.
yeah, that would be really great.
So I understand now you're going to do a demo for us.
Yes, I will.
Okay, and in that, maybe while you're demoing, I can ask you a few more questions and we can go on?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Normally, when I'm giving a session, of course, I don't talk a lot, but I
Right.
will, today.
To help
so
us
that
out,
we,
thank
yeah,
you.
So that
And
we
then
can
what
see.
are some of the results that you have seen in your practice so far?
Oh, all kinds of very marvelous things. Actually, right now I'm working with a woman who had a skydiving accident and blew out all her vertebrae in her back. So she's now got 2 long
Harrington rods.
Yeah, rods in there. And so what we're doing is getting her mobile again, teaching her body what it feels like to move
Right.
the different parts, because for so long she hadn't been able to move at all.
Wonderful. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing the demo. Folks, hold on just for a few moments. We're going to take a quick break and set the table up, and we'll be back with a demo from Audrey. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, welcome back. Audrey's now going to give us a demonstration on what Trager looks like, and we'll have a chance to see how effective it is. Okay, Audrey.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to start by putting myself into that state of presence that I was talking about earlier, and just allowing myself to work myself into a person's body. Then I would play around with the neck. I don't usually talk when I'm giving a session, and people are covered so that they feel safe.
Okay.
So, but for this demonstration,
So like you were mentioning earlier, it's more than just about moving the body
oh, it
itself.
absolutely is.
Right.
The movement is just the conduit.
Right, okay.
It's the way in to the unconscious mind.
Okay.
So,
as you're moving, if you're moving Paul around, are you feeling for restrictions? Or are you looking for?
I am. I will know when he has a holding pattern. That's what we call a restriction somewhere. And then I'll get off the table, and then I'll work my way around the body.
Mhm.
Do you want to go up? Thank you. So the next I would work on and just saying hi. It's all very playful and very soft and gentle. Trager is not something that hurts at all. And if it does, then we're doing it wrong, because what we want is for the person to feel so comfortable and free that they'll just let go.
Okay. So when you feel an area that's not moving very well, do you focus into that area a bit more?
I
or-
do focus a little bit more, but the rule in Trager, and the only rule we have, is when we come to a restriction, we go less.
Oh, okay,
Because when something is holding on, it's because it's afraid.
right.
And so when you go less, you're making it feel safe.
Feel safe, right. That's the opposite sometimes of other modalities where they go in a bit deeper. If there's
Exactly.
Or thrust a bit harder, or
And for us, it is very, very different. So I have a very innocent mind when I'm working. I don't assume anything.
okay.
So I'll work the belly and I'll work the upper chest, but because we don't have a lot of time, I'll get Paul to turn over.
So typically, how many sessions would you see? I know it's a hard question to answer, but on average, would you?
Well, now because I'm getting older, I see less.
Right.
So I probably do about 6 a week.
Okay.
In my prime, I would have done probably 3 a day,
Okay.
but no more than that.
Right. So then is Trager something that somebody could come every month for indefinitely, or is there a
Um,
focus of treatment on it?
It depends on the person. I usually recommend somebody come for 4 treatments 1 week apart,
Okay.
because what I'm doing is teaching you something, and so I want that learning curve not to dissipate.
Right. Okay. All right.
So I work the leg and do different things on the leg. I'll work a little bit of the shoulder.
So just for the sake of the viewers, let's say Paul's shoulder was locked up.
Mm-hmm.
How would you approach it then, other than the way you're doing it now? Because his shoulder is quite mobile. He's
Yeah.
obviously had some treatments.
I would
Slow it right down
just slow it right down,
and focus in.
which is what I'm doing with my client that I was talking about earlier. You know,
Right.
she can't handle big movements at this point,
Okay.
so it's all my mind.
Okay.
So the movement is very slow and soft and light, but in my mind I'm saying it can be this free, it can be this loose, it can be that gentle.
Okay. And then as the area becomes more loose in the treatment, then you would start to put more vigor into your
I
movement?
would,
Okay.
but it's not putting more vigor into my movements, it's allowing me to go into his body, so he will start letting go and the movement will just get bigger.
Okay.
It's not anything that I am particularly doing, it's him that's doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, allowing that to happen. So this is the part of Trager that everybody thinks is the only thing,
Right.
is the rocking.
I'm sure that feels very good, though. I mean, it looks
Oh,
good.
it does.
Yeah.
But
It
at
can go on for a while.
But at the same time, I'm not just rocking his body. What I'm doing is imparting some information.
Okay.
This free, this soft, this open, this spacious, this light.
And how long do your sessions last?
My sessions last between an hour and 1 hour and 3/4 about.
Okay.
Yeah.
That just depends on the person, or do they book in different times?
No, it depends on the person.
Okay.
Because this is a holistic approach, he might have a pain in his shoulder, but the pain might start here. So I don't just focus in on one particular area. I'm giving the whole body that experience so that he can let go on whatever level is important for him to let go on.
So you work on the entire body each session?
Each session, yes.
Well, we are an integrated unit, aren't we?
We are.
We're an integrated being, so.
Yeah, yeah. It's not just a shoulder that's sore.
Right.
And it's not just a body that's sore, it's the body-mind. So,
Right.
so it's the emotions too.
Okay.
So when you're feeling safe and calm and relaxed, that emotional aspect can be addressed as well.
Now, when you work on people, do they always have T-shirts on and shorts?
No.
Okay.
We allow somebody to be comfortable. So for some people, if I were at home, Paul would take his shirt off.
Okay.
He would probably leave shorts on or underwear.
Right.
So the least amount of clothing is underwear.
Right.
The most can be anything.
Right. Now, many women leave their bras on, or how does that work?
Most of them do at first, but if they come for other sessions, then the more relaxed and comfortable they get with me, the more trusting we are together, then they'll usually allow that. But you're draped anyway, so it's not as if you're lying there exposed.
Right. So you drape like what massage therapists would drape
Yeah,
as.
yeah.
Okay. Great. And then typically, how do people feel after they leave? Would you recommend they don't drive a vehicle, or?
Well, that's a good thing. Paul, get off the table. Just really quickly. What I do for somebody, you can just stay right there. I get them to feel their feet, put in a sky hook where your 2 ears meet at the top of your head, and introduce a tail into your life that trails on the ground, breathing into what I call your umbrella, and shift your weight. So I'm getting people grounded
Grounded. Wonderful.
before they leave.
I think we're running out of time.
I think so too.
Paul, if you just want to have a seat on the table again for a minute and relax and enjoy what you just felt. So, Audrey, thank you very much for coming on the show.
thank
Greatly
you for
appreciated.
having me.
Folks will have Audrey's information as well as a view of her book and her 2 books and the CD that she's put together for us. On behalf of the Shaw Cable and Choices, thank you for coming on. Folks, thank you for watching. Next session, we'll be having an Ayurvedic therapist coming onto the show, and she'll be discussing a very ancient form of medicine out of India. It's about 3,000 years old. It even predates traditional Chinese medicine. So we'll be having that on the show as well next time. So on behalf of everybody here at the crew, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you had an enjoyable time and learned something else about our healthcare system and what options we have or what choices we have. Thanks very much and take care. Good night.
Good night.